Hello, everyone. Welcome to Office Kool-Aid podcast. I am really excited for my guest here today. Chris Capron has been a professional chef for over 20 years. He attended culinary school and came up in some high-profile kitchens in Miami in the early 2000s. He ran a donut pop-up in Naples, Florida for several years before getting back into a hotel kitchen. And Chris and I have been friends for like 36 years. We've known each other since high school.
I
And
know. Wow.
right, uh, almost approaching 4 decades. I was like, well, let me get more precise than that. And we also, my first waitressing job was at a same restaurant. We worked together, and he was front of the house then as a host and bartender. And I was 19 at that time, so a while ago. And he really makes the most amazing donuts. I was following him on Instagram for his donut pop-up, and it was like and I'll say this, donuts aren't even my most favorite pastry, although I love sweets, but it was really like food porn. I was like, I have to go. I have to visit. And I hadn't seen you, and I don't know when the last time I had seen you. It had been a while. So
It's years. Yeah.
yeah, so it was 2019. I decided, you know what? I don't have anything going on today. I'm just gonna, it's like an hour and a half drive. Let me go over and just surprise him. And I did. And the donuts were delivered as promised. They were amazing. So
Oh, awesome. And
over
you
there.
popped up at the pop-up.
Pop up.
It was great. So, well, Marianne, thank you so much. I'm really honored to be a guest on your podcast. Thank you for asking me. I'm very excited about
I'm glad you're here.
it. And I know we're going to talk about restaurants and I, like you said, I've spent a ton of time uh, being a professional chef, and it's, I think, something that, I just became, the choice became clear. Like at some point, I've always been creative. I think I knew I didn't want to really, sit at a desk in an office and do that kind of thing. Um, and I was in a band for a lot of years, for 4 years in a band. We played in Gainesville. We moved up to Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and it was great. Um, being in a band, everybody worked in restaurants, as most musicians and actors do. Um, and I was a much better cook than server or anything like that. Then I realized I was a much better cook than bass player, and I'm like, this is the direction I should go.
Right.
And I was very excited about it. I worked in this southern restaurant in Chapel Hill called Crook's Corner, and it really, like, ever since then, I've said that was the restaurant that solidified that I fell in love with doing this. It was very cool. I was so excited to show up every day. Um, and it was, really one of those experiences that I can't look back at any part of it uh, and feel negative about it. It was truly great, which is, I think, very rare because there's a lot of difficulty in a lot of different places.
Sure.
So um, it was the guy who ran it, Gene. He was really neat. I remember when I first started, he came in the kitchen, and if you see Gene, he looks, serious. He's a business owner. He's running this restaurant. I was new. I had no idea. And he comes in and tells everybody, everybody outside. And I'm thinking like, oh my God, we're all gonna like get yelled at. What did I do? I didn't even know what I did. Walk outside. He's standing there and basically says, look at the sunset. Isn't that beautiful? And I was like, what? This is so weird. And it is beautiful, So it was just like, from that moment, I was like totally hooked. And I'm like, oh man, this is very cool. Um,
That's an amazing boss.
that was great. He was just somebody that, like, very, very knowledgeable, always a lot of fun to talk to him because he knew I mean, you could come up with anything. Say, hey, Gene, you ever hear about this? And he'd be, oh yeah, he was great at that. Both him and Bill Smith, the chef, you could, talk to him about anything. NPR was like on 24/7 in the kitchen, unless it was some crazy like punk rock or something like that in this Southern kitchen, which was a lot of fun. Um, and it was, I knew that that's what I wanted to do. I decided I was going to move back to South Florida and go to culinary school. And I did that, and that was an interesting experience. I found that the people that did the best were the people that already were working somewhere. It was not the idea of like, we're going to teach you how to cook. It was you're just you were there to really hone your skills, um,
Yeah.
you know, as it were. And you know, uh, then to go and come up in some of the kitchens in Miami, that was just as much school as Johnson and Wales was. I was working at Norman's in Coral Gables, and it was just amazing. Like again, every day I was so excited to go there because every day was something that I had never seen before.
Mm.
And the truffles and foie gras and all of these things just used so liberally everywhere. It was like, wow, it was truly amazing and just again like a huge learning experience. Um, one of the dinners that we did was right after 9/11, and I always remember that one because it featured a bunch of the chefs from New York
Mm.
that they came down. This was Tom Colicchio,
Oh, wow.
uh, Daniel Boulou, Michael Romano, and I mean these are huge chefs from New York, and to work, right, to be able to do things alongside like Danielle or Tom Colicchio, it's just like I look back at it now and I go, man, that was absolutely insane. So cool.
That's awesome. What I'm hearing, and that I can really relate to is how exciting it is to be learning something new, every day. Like that is part of what makes it fun. Am I hearing
Yeah.
that correctly?
Yeah, absolutely. I think as the years go, um, it's difficult. I think that's maybe why people lose interest with things because there's nothing new here. I'm doing the same thing today that I did a week ago. Um, and if, unless you're doing things to push yourself, the, the the grind of the kitchen can become very monotonous. Like I learned that I kind of I'm okay with repetitive tasks.
Yeah.
Take that as you will. Um, but it's so there's a lot of jobs that you do it the same way every time, and that kind of uh like looking at my kids now, they watch stuff and they go, oh, that's satisfying, like some we like weird videos, and I guess like that's a good word to describe it. It's like it's satisfying to do this thing and have it turn out the same way every time. um you know
Well,
but yeah, I think if you're not learning, you run the risk of just kind of getting bored.
right. And complacency, I think, becomes, a downstream effect of boredom. Um, I a little interesting thing that you're saying there though, really satisfying. And there's a certain amount of satisfaction where we have mastered a skill and that repetition of it we that helps with our confidence, and that's good for our mental health. Like I know how to do this task. I can do it in my sleep even, like
Yeah.
I think that that is satisfying. Um, and also though, although I'm someone who needs a lot more variety, I think, than you in my work life, um, when we do repetitive tasks and I can enjoy them for brief amounts of time, it's kind of like a metronome, like the calming effect of a metronome. And you're a music,
Hmm.
and kind of music's a big deal in my life. So I kind of see those like repetitive tasks as, um, satisfying in that way. It's just, okay, it's calming. For me, doing certain tasks like washing dishes, like unleashes creativity. I don't know what it is about
Yeah,
water, but like you wash dishes pretty much the same way, unless you really screwed up a pan, then it's, a lot of elbow grease to get, but washing dishes is
right.
one of those tasks that we do throughout our daily routines and stuff. And but I find it very satisfying, and also like it just unleashes creativity for me. So
Yeah, it's it's funny with the washing dishes. Like whenever at home, when I'm washing dishes, I do it the same way every time. I have like the two two sinks, and I'll fill one up, and I'll the other sink has like the garbage disposal in the bottom, so I'll like rinse everything off. Not that this is important in any way, but I'll rinse it off. I'll put it in the other sink with, that has soapy water in it. I'll clean it. I'll put it back in this sink, rinse it, drain this one, put the little thing in there to hold your dishes when they're done. And it's just like it's the shuffling back and forth of like, you know, I don't know. It's satisfying. My family looks at me and they go, "That's not how you wash dishes." And I'm like, "There's probably like a million ways to do this, and this is good for me."
and that's such a key point, I think, in work relations and work dynamics. I used to always say, like in my past relationship, I was, even though it's no longer, we had a very successful relationship. But one of the things that I think kept us from petty arguments was this rule. And it was, if it has to be done a specific way, guess who gets to do it? So you
Yeah,
couldn't delegate specificity. Like you can delegate a task, but if it has to be done a very specific way, no, no, no. Like you get to do it.
right.
And it worked really well from, like these little petty arguments that can happen. Like, you're going to argue, so save it for stuff that matters in terms of
Yeah,
keeping a happy environment. And I think that whether that's your home life or work life, it's kind of a good rule of thumb to go by. Because the bosses that like the micromanagers are really the worst in my world. But I have also learned that people who are completely missing in action are their own ball of wax that are complicated to deal with as well. And in a kitchen, I mean, well, now we're dealing with, there's potential dangers. So there is a certain amount of uh, this is the standard of how we do it that probably should be imparted to everyone, just our little things in keeping ourselves behind and, you know,
right.
all those things that we do to kind of keep ourselves safe because we're dealing with fire and, stuff like that. But
Yeah,
I'm curious about your thoughts on that and that comment that you made, like, well, this is what works for me, even though there's a lot of different ways to do this task.
right. I think that brings up quite a few things actually with being in a restaurant because like if I had $1 for every time somebody said, well, like you show someone how to do something, oh, well, this, so and so showed me how to do it differently. Okay. Um, like that just happens. It's not obviously what anybody uh, really wants to happen. We
Yeah.
would like everybody to be on the same page. And it's not that there is only one way to do something, but any restaurant that you go to, if you get a dish and it comes out and you see it and it looks a certain way, tastes a certain way, that's why you come back. If the next time you come back, it doesn't look the same and it doesn't taste the same, and people will stop going to that restaurant pretty quickly because that consistency of it has to look like this. This is the process for making it. All of those things, it is very specific,
Yes.
and so it's like you have to be able to show people how to do something. Say it's like this. Uh, and I can in my head, I guess, as I do things over and over again, I break them down to be like, it goes like this. This is
The micro.
where now if I'm trying to teach somebody, I can say, this is how you do it. And it's not as fluid sometimes as just talking to somebody. literally it's like I'm going to do it. I'm going to kind of talk about it a little bit as I'm doing it, but really I want you just to watch and, you
Yeah.
know, I'll do it. We'll kind of do it together and then you do it. And, and it's, that's a model that is a lot of, you see a lot of times in kitchens, but it's, uh, people don't have, sometimes, people don't have those distinctions about things that, doing a specific job over and over again, you develop those things. Well, I do this. If I tilt the pan this way and I flip it like this, then, the grease runs down like this and this goes over this way. And all of these things that just become second nature. Sometimes it's a little hard to explain them to somebody. And even if you do, they may not really grasp it. They're not, like just
Right.
like, okay, I don't,
Well,
whatever.
I mean, there's 8 different learning styles. One of the things I do is I'm a tutor, and so and I been certified, and so I taken training on it, and there's like 8 different learning styles, and most of what we're taught in our K through 12 education is really 2 styles. So if you're kind of an outlier and you're struggling, and maybe you even have a learning disability or what have you, then things get like more complicated, and sometimes what I have found all that my years of working in restaurants is, a good trainer takes the time to make sure you're comprehending. They don't just
Right.
bulldoze through it. Um, that to me is the mark of a good trainer is really as we're going along, checking in to make sure comprehension is going on. And I totally approach things the same way where it's like, let me show you one. Let's try it together and then you show me, because people are like, oh yeah, yeah, that's easy. And then they try to do it and like, oh, where's this, that, and and that's kind of really how you get to confirm what they do know, what they don't know. And
Right.
stuff, you're not going to get it on a first pass. It's going to take, you know, doing it several times before we really, have it where it's ready for the customer in terms of restaurant business, ready to be put on a plate in front of a customer.
Yeah. And unfortunately, restaurants are sometimes um, it's a difficult environment because it's not that the other people want to see you fail, but in some ways they do. It's kind of funny. Like, I watch this person come in, oh, they're going to go down in flames. Watch this, and it's like, it's terrible if you think, oh, like this is just
Tough.
one restaurant. Why would you want anybody
Yeah.
to fail? But it happens because kitchens, it's a very high stress, high performance, high, all those kinds of things. And, sometimes it's much easier to just go, oh, you really messed that up rather than to take that time and be like, here, I'm going to kind of walk you through this so that you have a better understanding of how to do it.
Right.
Um,
Just not
and
time.
right. And yeah, sometimes there just isn't the time. It really is a sink or swim a lot of the time. One of the things when I worked at Norman's that was really funny is, somebody would come in and it was very, structured where you would come in, you started at garde manger, which prepared all the salads and cold items on the menu and, did certain tasks every day. And so, when I worked on that station, we would get these new people that would come in for their first day. And at some point, you're cleaning up and you look around and you're like, what happened to that dude? Like they're gone. They just kind of looked around and said, no, I'm out of here. And like went over the wall. And, and you're like, okay, it's because it was a lot. It was definitely a lot of information to take in and that kind of trial by fire it was was very real. It was very there. And this, was just back in the 2000s. Before that, it was the Wild West. As far as kitchens, now I think things are so tame in a way that it's like, um, that presents its own set of difficulties.
Agreed. Having worked in the restaurant business since I was 13 years old. My first was at a nursing home. I was a diet aide. I made pot roast smoothies.
Oof.
Yeah. And then I was a busser at a dinner theater. And then my first waitressing job was with you at Route 66. But it's and I've worked in just about every kind of restaurant type there is, outside of I haven't worked for a hotel. Um, so the the worst managers were and the worst trainers were the people who had a college degree in restaurant management but had never waited a table or washed a dish or cooked behind the line, or you know
Right.
they were like the absolute nightmare to me of who to work for, because they had theories, but
Yeah.
they didn't have any practical skill or like empathy for, I mean, the thing about the restaurant business for me, what I love about it is no one's really more important than the other. Certainly there's ego problems in it, but it's like you can be a fantastic Michelin starred chef, but if you don't have clean plates to put it on, you're not shit, in my opinion.
Yeah.
You know,
Okay, good. We can curse here. I wasn't sure.
of course.
I was being good. Um, yeah, absolutely. And it's uh that every job, yes, is important. And oh my gosh, I lost my train of thought of where I was going to go with it. I was so
I'm
excited we could
excited
curse.
about cursing. I was at an open mic recently, and they were like, I really did not. I even adjusted to effing, and that was still unacceptable. So, like, it's just
Yeah.
words, people. It's not.
Oh, this was it. It's I worked in several places where you'll you have this one person that whenever they go on vacation, it takes three people to do their job. One was at this hotel when the guy who made breakfast in the morning would go on vacation, and he had worked there literally for 20 years, put three kids through college, and woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning every day and came in to cook breakfast. When he went on vacation, and which was like a month because he had so much time off, um, it was horrible. Like I can just remember you looking at it on the schedule, and you're just every day is like, oh my God, this is just I cannot wait for this person to come back. And it's when they're there, you don't think anything about it. They come in, they do their thing, they go. You almost never see them, never have to worry about it. Um, but literally when if to try to replace that one cog in the machine is just like next to impossible, you know.
For sure.
Uh,
And
and
to
so that there are no small jobs, like no small actors. There are in a kitchen that's everything
it is.
relies on each other.
It's a symphony. It really is a symphony. And if people aren't doing the right job at the right time, the wheels come off the cart, and it's a shit show, as we like to say in the business.
Yeah.
Um, or I'm in the weeds was another one.
Oh,
And and it really is, if someone's not doing what they're supposed to be doing when they're doing it, the domino effect is, is it comes off pretty quickly. I mean, I don't know
yeah.
scientifically the time in my mind, but it's once you kind of start that slide, it's really hard to kind of recover. Um,
Right.
and it's just
I, I think that's one of the other things about working in a kitchen is um, when it's a great kitchen and people are invested in being there, they there becomes this flow, and it's like watching ballet. It's like watching a great team, you know, run a play to perfection. And to see it in a restaurant, like there was one time I remember I went to a Hooters and sitting there watching the guy make chicken wings, but he was like the master. And, everything, it might sound silly, but it's just like, if you're working at a busy restaurant doing chicken wings, there's a lot of opportunity for like, 10 million orders and, this is this kind of sauce and this and that. And I mean, to watch him just in this state of flow where it's like he could have closed his eyes, I bet, and still just been, grabbing stuff and doing his whole thing. And I remember to this day, I remember sitting there being enthralled and watching the guy. That was much more, gratifying than the sports or whatever else there is to look at in Hooters.
Yes, there's plenty of things at Hooters, but no, I get that where there's magic in watching people who are lit up by whatever it is that they're doing. Um, I watched something on a program and I was just kind of flipping channels and I settled on this channel briefly and um it was this person talking about their enthusiasm for Civil War reenactment, which like holds no interest to me in terms of something I would do or even want to go see. But this person's enthusiasm for it was so mesmerizing and contagious and joyful. And, I watched because I was so caught up in their enthusiasm. That was really satisfying to go back to that word, and
Right.
so I totally get that. And when you work with people, when I think about all the restaurants I ever worked at, Route 66 was probably the most fun in terms of maybe two or three people that didn't kind of gel. Back of the house, front of the house, we were, a tight crew and we had
Yeah.
fun. We like genuinely liked each other, genuinely wanted to make sure the kitchen, there wasn't this friction between the back of the house and the front of the house, which I have felt in other places where like the last restaurant I worked at, it was like, oh, who's working today? And then I would change my recommendation to the guest based on who was working because this one guy just, he was always
Yeah.
going to put out a medium well or well done burger, even when he ordered it rare. It's just like,
Right. Right. Yeah, Route 66 was good. That was still relatively early in my career of working. I think I haven't at that point I hadn't decided that I wanted to be a chef. I knew I liked restaurants, and Route 66 I was a host and I was a bartender for a while. Um, Part of it was I had a motorcycle that it was a Yamaha Route 66, so it said Route 66 right on the side of it, and they let me, as part of the draw, I would park it right next to the front door. And I thought I was, pretty hot stuff to like pull up and most people would come in and just go, "Oh, look at that, restaurant." And then at the end of the night, at some point, I'd go out and get on it and like ride home. So I thought I was pretty cool. Um, but that that was a good time. It was a good restaurant.
yeah, it makes all the difference. I think people being engaged, and I kind of get this whole push. I'm always following what's going on in LinkedIn and the latest things. And there's this othering between management and the worker and engagement and this hyper focus on engagement. But it's like, engagement actually is not that hard to get from employees, but it really starts with, treating them with dignity and respect and, caring about them beyond just what they do for you. And, to me, it's like engagement's really not that hard. They're like, making it very complicated with all these, you know, metrics and stuff. And it's like, well, no, if you take care of your employees, like that Gene, just go back to your example, hey, this is so beautiful. It's worth taking a break for and experiencing it together. Like that's actually really brilliant.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It was, and to think about that restaurant, which I do often, um, during the holidays, like you'd come in, there would be uh pastries and like a legit, big German Stollen sitting there, all cut up, and you drink your coffee and eat the stuff. And it was always great. Like, just made me want to go, this is what I would want to do. This is where I would want to be. Why would you want to be anyplace else? Because they really took care of their people. They wanted them to be, you know, excited to come to work, happy, invested in what they were doing. And I think, at this point, we've all seen it for people that you go to a restaurant and somebody's, not very excited about giving you, whatever it is. It's like, okay, it is what it is. Like this is not, uh, you know, earth shattering or, making, I don't know how to say it. You're just like, yeah,
It is.
okay. I don't know if I'll go back there again, but this place, oh, this is good.
Yeah, and it's basically to me, it's kind of like they're phoning it in. They're not, it's just, this is my job, I'm doing it, I'm doing the bare minimum. And like for me, the line that I've used, and it's more than a line, it really is when I go for a job in the restaurant, and I've been in and out, since I was 13. But the thing that I always say is, my goal is to assess my guests what kind of experience they want as soon as possible, which I'm pretty good at. But if they're willing, I'd love the opportunity to transform a meal into a memory for them. And if I do that, it's like really, really satisfying. I'm college educated, blah, blah, blah. I've done so many different jobs, and people are like, I've had people say, like, why are you waiting tables when you could be doing X, Y, or Z? And and there's always this kind of like, oh, real job versus restaurants are real jobs, people. So let's just
Yeah.
get that straight. There's a lot of educated people who depend on restaurant work as a second income because they do not pay teachers and social workers enough money. So you're this idea that people who work in restaurants are not educated and lazy or whatever, which I've gotten from I had this one woman once at Longhorn where I worked, the people would screw up the takeout boxes because they were counterintuitive the way that they closed together. So I would kind of like instead of keep wasting them, I would kind of preemptively explain this to a guest when I was giving them one. And this woman was like, counterintuitive. She goes, that's an SAT word. And I said, yes, it is. And she's like, you went to college? And I said, yeah, I graduated cum laude. And she's like, well, what are you doing here? I said, well, I'm smarter than most. And then I walked away.
And then-
But there's
like,
this,
yeah, we're not all like, druggies or homeless or whatever. Like,
whatever the stereotype
whatever
is.
your perception of, a server is.
Well, and I
I
once,
think it,
I once,
I was gonna say, I think it would be healthy for people to work in restaurants or to experience what it's like to serve somebody.
absolutely,
And, you know,
they would never have quibble about tipping again.
right. People would, I can say it because of spending this many years of, having to cook orders, which, I'm not saying, um, if you're going out and you're paying money, should you have something the way that you want it? Yes, absolutely. That's part of going to a restaurant for sure. Uh, but then there are also like it's become, I mean, this could be its whole conversation, but there become where there are sort of almost no limits to, well, I want like this, and to the point where uh, you can, as one of the cooks, look at the ticket and just go, this person does not understand that this is almost, unfeasible for us to make this thing this way,
Yeah,
you
I'm not
know.
a personal chef. You've come to a restaurant, and yeah, we can modify, but you've gotten ridiculous, and that's like
Right.
we've gone like the pendulum has swung too far, and the customer is always right. And the reason that old adage started was because in the early 1900s they were ripping off customers, so it was kind of like that became a new standard to try and regain that trust, but it's now been abused by some customers. Again, Longhorn, I used to call her Leah Salmon. Guess why? Her name was Leah, and she always ordered the salmon, and she always she was always trying, we had a very generous comp policy. So she was like trying to get it for free. And so
Right.
run people around and like to the point where now one of the managers would take out the piece of raw salmon for her to inspect before cooking it. I'm like, why aren't we firing this customer? Why?
Yes, this is not worth $24 or whatever, whatever that
It was like
piece of
18.99.
salmon costs.
But yeah, it was like
Yeah.
this woman is, and not only that, like she would take away from other guest experience because she was so high maintenance, and like and when I served her, it went to perfectly, and she's like, "Well, that was good." Like, there's no pleasing people, so why are you trying to?
Right.
And like, like for me, I really do think there is a certain point where when someone is in the habit of really, they're just trying to get stuff for free, or they constantly, they're one of these chronic people who come in, but they don't tip. They, always send stuff back. It's like, that's a time for me, for a manager to say, it looks like this place isn't for you. And this is the last time I'm gonna pay for your meal and you're no longer welcome here. I think
Right.
it's totally acceptable. What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, but people would, just absolutely freak out, and if that happened, right? Like you can just imagine somebody,
Oh, I
you
saw
know,
it. I saw
clutch
it.
my pearls, like, oh my goodness, how could you say that to me? It's like, well, you complain every time you come in here, and one person requires the entire kitchen to be on edge of doing something different than what we normally do. I've seen it where people will change a dish fundamentally to, I want it this with that, with, whatever, and all these different things where this is not what, we were, this is not what this dish was, but we'll make it and send it to them. And then they'll say, I didn't really like it. It's like, well, that's why that's not on the menu. That's why whatever is on the menu, like we know that that's good. If you don't like cheese or have an intolerance or something, whatever it is, obviously, if it can be made without that, sure. My son has a lactose, it doesn't agree with him. So if we're going to go out somewhere, he doesn't get the cheeseburger. It's just like, yeah, take the cheese off or, just give me a hamburger. Easy fix. Like, no, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Sure. But then if he's going to order, um, you know, I'd like the lasagna, but I don't really want cheese in that. And I'm sorry, man, I can't do that. It's like, that's done. It's not going to happen.
It's
You
like
should
at
choose
least
something different.
cheeses and lasagna. Like,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, and I that's like really a great point where I feel like um the last restaurant I worked at, we really were empowered to, not having to get everything checked, like we could just we were empowered to kind of make, reasonable decisions with people, like, and if you had to, oh, sure, I'll go check to see if, just to put on the show of checking to see if we can do that. But like, of course you can't do lasagna without cheese. And, there's sometimes these like really, I love these, there these travel reviews that I've seen, and it's like the beach was too sandy. And it's like,
Right.
yes, the beach is gonna
Where,
be sandy.
yes, I love people, but there's just, uh, at some point somebody should go, what's wrong with you? Like, why would you say that? Like that's,
I used to
or,
think
and
those stupid questions, but well, yeah, there are a few,
yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I think part of like, you know, I can remember going to Cheesecake Factory and being like, what is this spiral bound notebook of 1,000 different things that you can order? Um, and I think that is, has, I'm not saying it's Cheesecake Factory's fault, but it's like, this idea of a restaurant has to be all things for everybody. You have to have something for everyone. Personally, I don't agree with that. I like the idea of places that are small and you go in and say, they got three, four, or five things on the menu. If you want this, you go here. If you want something different, you go there. And like that's it.
I completely agree with you that a curated meal menu is much better than like the Cheesecake Factory has some wonderful dishes on their menu and it serves its function and purpose and the dining options that we are blessed to have in this country. But it is overwhelming for me as someone when there's too much choice, it's almost that's not good. Like a right
Right.
amount of choice is good. And and then it becomes, so ubiquitous that like everywhere you go, they got the standards on everything, on every menu, so it starts to kind of make it not special. I mean, and we've evolved really, like going out to a restaurant really used to be a special occasional thing where now it's a daily thing for some people. And
Right.
and I agree, like for me, when I'm really in the mood for a particular cuisine or uh, dish, I have a few places that I know in mind. That's where I'm going for it. And I love as part of travel exploring, new cuisines, new places. I get a lot of enjoyment out of it. But I can tell you, South Florida, and I have been in a lot of places, but South Florida has the best, most diverse Mexican food offerings. And I have lived in Texas, I have lived in New Mexico. I've spent a fair amount of time in Arizona, in California, and it's like I yeah, and I have like three favorite places in South Florida that I go to, and they're all like, kind of do their own little thing a little bit differently that I really like.
Oh, that's good. That's
Yeah,
cool.
and what I learned in New Mexico is New Mexican cuisine is not the same as Mexican food. And like after living there for 19 months, I was like, I can't wait to go back to the land of free chips and salsa, Florida. It bugs
Yeah,
me to like pay for like $6 to $8 for chips and salsa, and they weren't good. I'm like,
right.
paying $6 to $8 for them. They should be wowing me. Like, because I get the
Right. And it's just a throwaway that, everybody is going to order it. So open the can of this and put this and there you go. And yeah.
Yeah, I would
I
just
I
more. I don't know.
I think it's like difficult in that idea of having something for everyone. Not that you want to be, as a goal to exclude anyone. Not saying that at all. But do you really need to have a lot of like non-meat options at a barbecue joint?
No, you want.
You know, should you right? If and it's not to say that, I'm vegan and I'm going with a bunch of people and we're going to end up at this barbecue joint. I hope there's something there for me. Like, okay, absolutely. I understand that, you know, but I don't want to get myself in trouble being like, wow, that guy's uh
No, I get it. Like
like it,
I have my stepdaughter is a vegan and also a pretty accomplished vegan chef in her own right. Not professionally, but um, as a hobby, but as a way of life. And I can appreciate from her standpoint that, you're the odd man out and so you're trying to find something beyond a salad, everywhere you go. And I think it's nice to like, create one or maybe two signature things that is really tasty for that client, But yeah,
right,
we're not gonna like have as many offerings at a barbecue joint for a vegan. It's just not, it doesn't make sense.
right. And like by that logic, yes, it is nice to have something set up. I will say that because being on the you know other end of the ticket, a lot of times where somebody would ring in, hey, I need something that is vegan, I need this or I need that, and you're left with all of your tickets and everything that's going on at that moment to create like what do I have that I can put together in the next 3 minutes that's going to be like you know, a, a dish that's going to satisfy, for this person, and then not just be a salad or a bunch of vegetables, thrown on a plate where it's like, hey, here you go.
Yeah.
So to have something that is set up like, yes, now I can say in that vein, I appreciate that for my position, so
Yeah.
that you're not like, what am I going to do now? You know,
Yeah. Fine by
of that spontaneously coming up with something that you go, this is kind of out of my wheelhouse here. I don't have, you know, what do we have?
Yeah, exactly. And and that's kind of just from a standpoint of that, like I'm an omnivore. I can eat anything. When I went to take care of my stepdaughter, for a week, she had a kidney transplant, and
Mm.
so I went, and so she taught me how to cook for her because she couldn't, she had to, you know, be resting. So, and it was like, I was actually blown away. Like I had never tasted vegan cooking as well as this. Like, I really for a week, was preparing all these different dishes, and we made regatta cheese from Brazil nuts. Now, very labor intensive. I don't think I will ever do it, but damn, I couldn't tell the difference. It tasted
Wow.
just like regatta. And I was like, I'm blown away by it. I really was like, this is amazing. And then we made a cheese sauce out of carrots, potatoes, and nutritional yeast. And it tasted just like, Velveeta, or, something better than Velveeta, but, kind of
Right.
that cheddar cheesy sauce. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. So like from a, kind of my takeaway for that week was like, from a health standpoint, you know, incorporating some of these dishes that I learned about, or techniques that I learned about, felt like, oh, I could do this, you know,
Yeah.
nutritional yeast thing, not so much the Brazil.
There was this one dinner that we did at Norman's, that, oh my gosh, I can't remember the chef's name, but she specialized, you know, not only in vegan, but it was food that was raw. And so everything that she made, you know, had to be kept under a certain temperature. Like nothing could exceed, I don't remember exactly what it was, but let's just say, you know, 110 degrees or something like that. So everything was classified as raw. And she had two courses on this, you know, 5 course tasting menu, something like that. And everybody's scrambling around in the kitchen, getting stuff ready, and you know, this is coming out, and they're plating the first course. And then when it's time for hers, you know, kind of set up again, and everybody's just like, it's so chill, you know, this gets this gets that. And then the next course comes around, and all of a sudden it's this, you know, frenetic movement and you know crazy stuff happening again to get that course on the plate. And it was just it was I remember that one all the time, that it was such a difference in energy of what was happening from this moment to this next dish to you know back to hers, that it was just it was like really interesting. And even you know like the whole idea of eating raw food for health. Um, I can remember that she was striking. You look at her and just go, "You look healthy." You know, just it's it was really something that left an impression on me.
Yeah, and I struggle, with it. My weight, I'm always yo-yoing with my weight, and I can remember back in high school, a friend of ours, you know, single strand of ketchup on the French,
Oh my God.
and we're all like, "Come on, man!" And he love him, but he ate to live versus living to eat, and I'm definitely a live to eat person. I mean, I have to.
Yeah.
I think food is such a wonderful thing to enjoy. And one of the things that's really the indignities of getting older is that, food I've enjoyed my entire life. Now I'm developing sensitivities, or, allergy like responses, and I can no longer eat them. And I'm like, really? Like,
Yeah.
so now it's like I used to be like a little coffee with my half and half, and now it's like I drink black coffee. I do some of the alternative creamers, but it's not half and half. And
Right.
so I've kind of gotten used to the black coffee thing, and but it's I'm always going to be someone who looks to food for that experience, that enjoyment, to indulge. I try to follow an 80-20 rule where 80% of the time I'm making healthier choices and lean cuts and, more vegetables and all that good stuff. But I really can't imagine being a person who just eats to live. And I frankly, I don't want to live to 100. Like if it's alfalfa sprouts and I live to 100, but everyone I know that's fun is dead.
Right.
I don't
Here's
want.
your pureed asparagus and, enjoy.
I have a quote about bacon. Like bacon is proof that God loves us and wants us to visit soon.
Yeah, exactly. I watch a lot of those things of like, uh, there's so much back and forth about specific kinds of diets and things like that. The carnivore diet versus, this. And there's one guy that I follow that he, literally eats 10 eggs a day, and, it's with a piece of cheese and some almonds and, this and that. And he's like, nutrition is not difficult. This is what you eat. And or he'll, have like a couple of big steaks and he'll eat those. And I'm like, if you look it up and say, like, is this legit? Can you eat this without your cholesterol being, to the moon? You'll find one study that says, yes, this is perfect. This is what you should eat. And then you'll find another study that says, no, you're going to die. And you're just like, okay, I wish that, somewhere you could feel confident in like, this is real. Like it seems like common sense to say if you're eating, 12 egg yolks and a big steak every day, that's going to be really bad for you.
Yeah.
But, you know,
Depends on the vessel. I mean, I'll say this, a peanut can be a healthy snack or a death sentence depending on the vessel you put it in. And so I tend to look at all of health information, whether it's food or medication or a vitamin supplement or just the environment that you're living in. I apologize for this coughing. I believe that my home has mold. Um,
oh no.
yeah, fun. But
Yeah.
I really do I really subscribe to that, and it's about becoming, tracking how you feel after you eat certain foods to kind of design what works for you. There's probably maybe a dozen, if you could classify people, maybe we fall into a dozen buckets, and then you have your individual, well, I'm intolerant or have an allergy to this particular food, so it's not going to work for me, what have you. But I worked for a company called Life Extension as a health advisor. It was a call center job, and I must have talked to 10,000 people in the 4 years that I worked there and giving health advice, and so you start to kind of see patterns and that kind of thing. And it would be great if it was like that easy, but it's always a new study. And what a good study tells you is you should do another study, because it's always the breadth of evidence and
Hmm.
make fair conclusions, but there's also always medical outliers. So, even though, like, to me, the worst advice ever is, well, if I can do it, you can do it. Like, it doesn't work that way. Like,
Uh,
no, it's like
right.
it's taking the time to really understand yourself and realizing that, like, the intolerance stuff to food, like, it may take up to 3 days to react to something. So that's what makes it kind of complicated to kind of track and figure out what works for you as an individual. Um, and frustrating as hell too, I mean, and then we are just always changing. Like I said, I could, right now, for the last 7, 8 years, I cannot drink milk anymore, half and half or cream cheese. And it's like,
Yeah.
no more cheesecake.
No. I
No.
feel it like if I have a bowl of cereal or something like that, I can still, I don't do it often, but I'll do it and then just feel like, okay, I know that that's what that is. Like I should not be consuming that milk. I've switched to black coffee because it just makes me feel better. Um, than. drinking like it's just like a heavier
Yeah.
feeling in your stomach and everything where it's like, oh,
Yeah.
so
It's not fair, this whole changing of in middle age with the food. I'm like, I joke, I'm like, you've already relocated my eyebrows to my chin, and now you're taking away the food. Like, come on, what have I got left here? It's like,
what's left?
I'm like, we got the food. Is, as we, travel through life and things don't work out according to plan, and some of our big dreams for ourselves when we were young, and but there's always food. And I just have to share too, like I can always remember when as a teenager at your home, your parents were both great cooks and great hosts, and the veal piccata, I think it was the first time I ever had
Mm.
veal piccata, and like it's an embedded memory for me. um and it was, it was just like it's one of my food memories too, like, going to the Caprons, and like there was always going to be something good to eat, and there was always going to be a relaxed, welcoming vibe, and a dog that was probably going to bother me.
Yeah, that was it.
Like, I'm a little scared
Um,
of that dog, but other than that, it was always just a very, and your parents' home was set up like where the kitchen was part of the entertaining guest space.
yeah, I remember that when we moved in, it was your, typical house that like you walked into the living room, there was a wall, and behind that was the kitchen. And then at some point they, remodeled it and knocked down the walls and put in like this big sort of, bar table. And so now everybody sat and could watch what was happening in the kitchen, which during holidays, there would be people sitting at one side of the counter and then sit, even though there were like the drawers there in the inside the kitchen part, we would line up stools and kind of sit there. And usually that was like my mom and me, and because we'd get up and be still doing stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a good time. And the veal piccata, like that was totally my dad. He was all about that chicken marsala stuff like that. He actually got written up in the newspaper one time for making this chicken marsala.
Oh,
I
that's,
remember them coming and taking pictures and stuff like that.
that,
So he was a good dude. I remember really fondly a bunch of stuff. One intersection was at Route 66. I can remember on like a day off, I was sitting there, I like, sitting in the restaurant, and for whatever reason, I had talked to my dad, and I remember him like walking in the front door and just like almost, kind of embarrassing, but yelling to the bartender, hey, I'll take this and take that and get this for them. And I'm just like, oh my God, Dad, like I work here. Um, but he was a good time, and he was cool about stuff like that.
yeah, nothing but great memories with your parents.
Yeah.
Okay, so what would be a takeaway nugget for someone who wants to get into the restaurant business and on the back of the house side? What would your advice be for them?
I think the like number one, just do it. Just go, find a place that you can get in as as a cook, as a prep cook. Um, I mean, so many stories of chefs, they literally start as dishwashers. Not that uh, that's hard to today to tell somebody, "Oh, just go wash dishes." Like it's because it's a difficult job and it's completely unglamorous,
Yes,
having to
I've done it.
clear somebody else's plate and stuff. But I will say this now, being uh, on this side of it also, though, there's something very, like we talked about, very relaxing and zen about being in the dish pit of a restaurant. Even though it can be very quick and you're moving and hustling and all this kind of stuff, people kind of tend to leave you alone, maybe because they don't want to hang out there. But you're there and you get to do your thing.
Yes.
But my advice would be to go and get whatever job you can, find, working in a kitchen, whether it's like I mean, it could possibly be fast food or any of the tropical smoothie, this or that, anything that has a kitchen, to get in and just at least take that first step. And if you like it, then you start to take another step. Um, Culinary school is like, I don't want to say that it's you don't really need to go to culinary school. Uh, it was great. It was a great experience. I mean, to this day, nobody's ever asked to even see my diploma. So it's like, okay. Um, and it didn't teach me to cook, but it taught me a lot of things. So if you're really into it and you're serious, culinary school, I think could be a good move for some people, kind of like what we were saying. Maybe not everybody, but for some people, it's definitely a good move. For other people, it's probably more beneficial to just jump in
Yeah.
and start working in different places. I think that it's like music. I think there's a lot of similarities between cooking and music. And like we all start to understand what kind of music we like. Who's your favorite? What do you really like listening to? What do you look at and go, that doesn't really do it for me, but this, I like this. Food, I think, is the same way, in that you start to see all these different restaurants and chefs and styles and go, that's cool, but that's not really, this. This is what, gets me excited. And, I would try to follow up on that and like, one, find it and whatever you need to do to be part of it. Um, and it's, working in a kitchen it takes a lot of grit, as they say. Um, there's because it's difficult. There's, there was one thing I made this correlation. My son plays hockey, and we went to a tournament a couple weeks ago. Um, and the team that we were versing, we won like they stopped counting at 10, or they stopped counting at 8, but I think we got at least 10 or 11 goals on this goalie. He was crying. The kid, I mean, like you could see it. He was emotional. You felt bad. I felt bad for him, but he didn't quit, and he stayed out there and just took it. And there, like it sounds bad, I guess, to say it, but he just stood there and he took that beating. And working in a kitchen, in some ways, is that. Can you stand there? Can you take it? It's hot. You're going to get cut. You're going to get a burn. There are people that are going to, maybe yell at you. It's a little better now than it was when I was coming up. Um, I had a chef, look me in the eye and be like, what are you retarded? And to which I fired back, don't ever call me that. And I was really surprised that he never did again. I had other friends that working on the line, the chef would pick up like a veal chop and literally smack the dude in the face with it and say, make it again. And you're like, the only response was, yes, chef. Now it's like, I'm going to sue you, or it just doesn't happen anymore. Um, but it's, restaurants, I guess the whole point of that, restaurants are historically very difficult environments to work in.
Yeah.
And you have to be serious about it, um, in order to put up with it. Like back in the day, people that worked for Gordon Ramsay and stuff like that, to work for somebody that would yell and berate people in the kitchen that much would, any sane person would go, why would you do that?
Yeah.
But if you worked for Gordon Ramsay for, any number of years, then you could do anything. You could go anywhere and cook anything. And people will go, you lasted in that kitchen for 3 years. You could do anything. You could run this kitchen, no problem.
Right.
And that was why people did that, because you knew if you were able to not just put up with it, but to thrive even in that kind of an environment, um, you could go anywhere and do anything, you know?
Great. I have two more questions for you. One, when you're at home and you're making your favorite comfort meal, what is the meal and what music is playing?
Oh, that's a good question. Um, let's see. One of the things that I really like to make is it's basically like a, a chicken piccata. Um, feels expensive, but and at least with chicken, I have a shot of my kids eating it. But I'll make like a chicken piccata, and usually put like a little bit of lemon. Um, I haven't really put the capers in there, but really, maybe it's more like chicken franchise, where you uh, take the chicken, pound it out, like start with some chicken breasts, uh, cut them so they're relatively thin, pound them out. And because that is important, you season them very well, dredge them in flour, and then make like an egg wash. I usually put a little bit of half and half in it, like that works well, just a little bit. And uh, then you stop there. It was chicken, seasoned, flour, egg, basically. If you were going to fry these, you would dredge them in breadcrumbs, and then, that's like standard breading, basically. But you stop in the egg. So when you take your pan and you put like either a little bit of butter or something like that, you put the chicken, it gets this sort of very lacy French toasty exterior to it, which is perfect then for a little bit of wine or like a couple of squeezes of lemon, a little bit of chicken stock, and then a couple of knobs of butter and some parsley or something like that. It's pretty simple. Um, or to try and keep it simple. I think it sounds complicated, but it's really not, and it comes together pretty quickly. Um, something like that with a little bit of mashed potatoes, and then you have this sauce go over it. That's great. Um, I have to back up. I guess you know what my all-time go-to would be. It's rigatoni pasta with tomatoes with a good tomato sauce and locatelli cheese.
Yeah.
So I guess I was trying to think about, I'm a chef. What would I make? But it would be if I had one meal to eat, uh, you know, last meal, it would be rigatoni with the locatelli cheese. That's it.
Well, both sound delicious. What music are you playing and when you're creating in the kitchen?
Um, it's funny for being in a band. I at this point I don't think I own a CD. Um, so I'll go more by mood, and I like stuff that um, it depends. I guess it's a lot of eclectic things, or so many of the bands that I have on my playlists are stuff that I listened to when I was in a band, or coming up. I loved a lot of like Van Halen and Motley Crue and all of that kind of stuff, and it's hard to get away from that.
Yeah.
Um,
I think though in the kitchen. Yeah.
yeah, like that kind of a lot of the Chili Peppers and things like that. To me, like that's music that's what I would listen to all the time. I don't know if I have one thing specifically, but it's just that sort of genre, that feel.
Yeah.
Um, because you know, it just gets me moving, and I like that kind of
Awesome. All right. Last question.
thing.
Um, and chicken piccata and mashed potatoes is actually one of my favorite. Like I love that. Love that dish too. It's a go-to for me. And pasta, anything. So I'd love to
Yeah.
try your rigatoni sometime. Uh, what is your most memorable dining out experience?
Hmm. One that I think about all the time was with my dad, that we went in Boca. There was Tom's Barbecue, Tom's Ribs, Tom's Barbecue, uh, and it was not glamorous to say the least. And I can distinctly remember one time going in and I would get the sliced pork sandwich, which it was like this giant bun and the sliced pork and the sauce. It was his sauce, Tom's barbecue sauce, which was like amazing. And a lemonade, and it had like those red checkered tablecloths. And I can remember sitting in there and the fans would break down. And so, I mean, you could see the smoke just starting to fill the restaurant. They would tell everybody, get up. And you'd go outside and everybody's standing there with their plates, eating. And they would fix the fan. And then you'd go back in and sit down. And I always think about that one because it was great. Uh, we would do, we would get stuff from Tom's like every New Year's, like all the time, but especially New Year's when you would get like collard greens and black eyed peas and cornbread and all that stuff. Oh my God, I loved it. So good.
I miss Tom's. Tom's was an
Yeah.
inspiration in Boca for sure. Yeah. Well,
Yeah, for sure.
this has been such a delightful conversation. I I'm always up for the how where the conversation is going to go, and I think we've offered the audience, some insights of what it's like to work in a restaurant and also just the pure enjoyment of food and how it works in our families and memories. And so thank you.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you. That was a lot of fun. I didn't know if I was staying on on target or just wandering. Like, okay.
Well, I mean, I mean, I love talking about food, and the restaurant business is such a colorful, I mean, we could have gone in so many different directions, but I think we kind of hit on a lot of different um notes to kind of give a like a muse bouche of what it's like to work in a kitchen. And uh
Ah, touche. Very nice.
thank you. I'm gonna sign us off here. Stay with me, Chris.
All right. Thank you so much.